Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Talent Revolution, Tales from the Trenches. I'm your co-host, Joe Shambaum, along with Jill Caniglio-Kirk.
Hey Joe, how's your day going today?
So far, so great, Jill. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, I know you're a pretty uplifted guy and you always seem to exude confidence, but there's a topic I'd like to probe today, and it's really around, have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're kind of having self-doubt and you're somehow not feeling like you're ready to take on the world? Maybe a little
All the
bit.
time. I'm just kidding. Um, no, I mean, that's a great topic. I mean, I think everyone goes through a cycle. I mean, I use the economy as a roller coaster, and I think all of different situations are roller coasters, whether it's a job, whether you're working out, whether you're, going through school, right? We all have highs and lows, and confidence, it honestly comes with experience. There's some folks that really have it, others that you have to gain through that, others have to psych themselves up for different pieces.
Right.
So, I've been through it, and there's many different situations, whether it was a project that I was working on, a really tough time at work for especially on the recruiting side, a big project of recruiting in different situations, and you just get down, right? And it's tough. You get into the weeds and you can't get back to strategize and really pull yourself out. And we can talk through some of those, but yeah, it is really frustrating.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, you get into a cycle like this and you kind of ask yourself, I know something's off, right? What can I really do about this? And I think a lot of people can identify that with whether they really want to acknowledge it or not. But something that's really helped me is really just having that opportunity to maybe have a trusted person that you can talk to. And, some people that, again, I think I've referred to this term on other episodes, your board of directors, people that know you really well, people that can guide and steer you. But I think it's really important that as professionals, we really take notice of when we see ourselves going wayward, right? And we can kind of self-identify some of these behaviors and figure out how to get ourselves on track. And there's lots of reasons I think that trigger cycles like this for us as professionals. One of the clear ones would be, any change in your job responsibilities, maybe loss of your job, right? Maybe you have a new boss and their demands are new. So there's lots and lots of reasons why we go through this. And, I know the term imposter syndrome is certainly something that resonates with a lot of people. And I thought today we can dig in deeper and try to talk about some strategies and tools that people can maybe refer to when they're in this zone and how they can kind of help get themselves back on track.
Absolutely. Let's dive into it because I think the first part is really figuring out how to identify it. I think folks get into a role, right? And you're going down the road or avenue, whatever you want to call yourself, and you don't know that you're necessarily going into that rut. So have you seen any ways to, just stop and be able to figure out that, hey, I am in this and I need to have a conversation, or I need to, stop and look
Yeah.
above the forest?
Well, I think for me, one of my tendencies when I'm getting like this is to overanalyze everything and to really put maybe too much energy into things that don't matter, right? So I think as my confidence goes down and I might be in a zone like this, I tend to notice, like, why am I making such a big deal out of nothing, right? And that's just one of my own tendencies. So that certainly might resonate with other people and be a red flag that they can watch for themselves. I think another one is really, just your energy level. Are you
Yeah.
dragging when you get up in the morning? Are you constantly tired no matter what you're doing? I think things like this really weigh on us. So I think just being honest with yourself and asking, like, hey, I know I'm not feeling like myself. What's really going on, right?
That self dread, right? Whether it's a project, whether it's work, whether it's looking for a role, that really, like you said, weighs on somebody and definitely is a good trigger to recognize and then go down some paths of how to help fix that, right? And I think you're right on talking to somebody, right? Having that board of directors, having that friend, coworker, whoever that person is a really key piece. And maybe there's two or three, and because each person might have their own niche that they're better for you on, right? Whether it's work or projects or different situations, because of levels, because of experience, and really having that board. I love that concept that you have on that side of it, and really be able to have that conversation is a huge piece. Because confidence, it will in essence leak out of you, right? I mean, when certain people are confident, and there's a fine line of confidence and cocky, but
Sure.
that shows, right? And it comes through, and I think you can get over those humps and really drive through things when you pull up that confidence a little bit and keep moving through.
Right. Fake it till you make it.
I mean, there's that
Sometimes,
too,
right?
right?
Sometimes, and if you can get good at that, right, and kind of try to find ways to kind of talk yourself up and, bolster yourself up when you are feeling a little lack of confidence, especially for important projects you're leading and other things, right? Um, I think that's another strategy to say, how do I maybe feel this way internally, but I know I have to also kind of rehearse and practice when I'm projecting. But let's dig a little bit deeper into what are some strategies for really trying to lift our confidence. We talked about having that board of directors, having people around us. Um, One thing that I've found very, very helpful in my own experience is really looking back at letters of recommendation I've received from people, or even reaching out at a time like that and deciding, maybe I want to ask someone else to provide something like that for me, right? I want to kind of build up my portfolio of documents. Maybe I'm in a job search mode or I'm thinking about what's next. And I found that when I actually ask someone else to tell uh, tell me what they see in me, it really shines a different light on my experience and it lets me see myself in a whole new way. And it certainly helps me craft better selling points about what's unique about me, right?
Absolutely. Well, we're our worst critics, right? So we don't
Right.
see everything that everyone else sees. So hearing those concepts from somebody else is huge. Those recommendations, like you said, on LinkedIn. But I think it's also sitting down and writing out your accomplishments, right? Taking
Right.
that time. You do a lot of interview prep and a lot of networking in different pieces, but what are those areas that you just love doing, right? And writing those out, sharing and thinking through that, and you share it and be able to talk through it. But that's a part of confidence, right? In having those
Right.
conversations, your own conversation, but being able to remember all of those different situations. And you
Right.
go through them all in different avenues, right? Think of every person's role can compartmentalize into different projects that they've worked on, and think about the accomplishments that they've had, right? To build that inner confidence back that, yeah,
Right.
I can do this and I've done this.
Yeah, another one for me is really trying to sit down and reflect on what are some of the most difficult situations I've faced in my career and what was the outcome, right? So sometimes reliving very hard times and reflecting on those and trying to like put those in perspective also says, like, if I did those things, I know I can get through whatever I'm at now. So at least for me, while some of us may not want to relive those things, it just kind of reminds me of what I have and what I'm capable of. And it helps, kind of encourage me to say, you know what, it's natural to maybe have apprehension or fear, but you've done a lot harder things than this, and you're certainly going to get through this.
Yeah, and the other one that I was thinking of is thinking about and we've all mentored folks or helped manage and look at other folks that you've worked with and where they've gone, right? And you're a piece of that. That's a huge compliment to your own self on where those folks have gone and are going to do now next. That's another piece to be able to say, well, you know what? I was a part of that because I remember this person and we did these things, and now, they're at this company doing this thing, right? So some people could take that as a, oh my God, no, why not me? But you got to look at the positive side, right? The glass needs to be half full in in those thoughts, not always the negative of why me, of,
Right.
hey, why me? Because I helped do these things, right?
Right. And what I would call that list for me is, what am I most proud of? What are
It's a
some of
great.
my biggest accomplishments? And like you said, a lot of that as a leader is some of the other people that I've helped grow into their roles that they're in today. Right.
Absolutely. And I think, the other part that you got to think through is, what's my elevator pitch, right? What am I doing and how do I sell myself? And, having that conversation in the mirror with yourself, right?
Right.
And sharing that and then going out and networking. right? And
Right.
talking through those and listening to other folks, but then them listening to you. And you'll be amazed on the people going, wow, you've done this and that's amazing. How about this? And tell me more about those things.
Right.
That's another way to build your confidence.
Right. And I am almost certain someone out there is not going, oh my gosh, they're talking about elevator pitches. I hate that. That's stupid. Right. But I'll be honest with you. I believe it is an instrumental tool that every person needs for every phone conversation, networking meeting
Yeah,
they have. There's so many opportunities to use that elevator pitch, or variations of it to just project your best self. And I would just say, while it's not fun to do, it's really important work to do
yeah.
and to really master that and have that in your hip pocket. So,
You've got to be ready with who you are and what you've done in all different situations, whether you're networking, whether you're just at the bar having a drink and someone there's like, oh well, hey, I'm so and so, what do you do? And you got to be able to share those different things, right? And talk about that. What are you most proud of? What are you this? And it could
right.
be personal, it could be work related, but you're right. I mean, elevator pitches, and we talk about that in early career, but all the way up to executives and through the end of your career, you're always got to have that elevator pitch, right?
Right. And truthfully, I will just say this is a place where I would say do not rely on AI to write this. It's okay to get some help, but this
Right.
has to represent you and it has to be your voice. So be very careful and tread carefully when you're using AI for things like this, because it has to have your tone. It has to kind of represent you, I think, in order to be effective.
100%. AI is a great tool to help, but it still is you. You have to write yourself. Another piece to build confidence is looking at technology, right? And what have you used and what do you love? And then what do you want to learn, right? Learning something is like, wow, you gain confidence as you learn these different technologies and tools. And education, you can't take away education. So it's another way to build confidence in your craft, in your world, by learning and sitting through a webinar or a course or, listening in somewhere.
Yeah, it's a great point because in my career, have found myself maybe assigned to projects that I'm like, I don't love this topic. It's not
Yeah.
something I really feel like is my strong suit. And it's a great opportunity to look for LinkedIn learning modules, other things you can do before you really embark on that to at least get some framework so you feel like you can navigate it more successfully and at least open your mind to being prime, right, for becoming more well versed in it. So that's really great point.
And as you build your confidence, you really go after I would start with what are you really the best at? And that builds your confidence. And then you can gain other experiences and other avenues, right? As you move through that, I want to say hiccup, speed bump in your confidence building side of things. But really, it's, start with the stuff you're really good at instead of going, well, I want to do this. And you got to get the wins, is what I'm trying to
Right.
say.
Right. And I'll say a time when people really struggle, I think is after they're going through some career change. Maybe they've been laid off and they're thinking like, I'll do anything, right? So then they're asked like, well, what are you passionate about? And those things become harder to answer because they're in a frame of mind like, oh, I'll do anything, right? I'm just in this mantra of feeling insecure, willing to do anything. And I think it somehow is a more difficult time to really be honest with yourself about what are your needs, what excites you, right? And those kinds of things. So I just think that's a especially challenging time for people to navigate. And I would just say it's certainly an important time to have people to have people to maybe practice your elevator pitch with, and at least put some energy into honing that story and doing that self searching as to what it is that you want to project.
Unfortunately, right now, and I mean, there's unfortunately too many people that are in that situation, and you have to have that right friend that's available to be able to pull themselves out of it, talk through those situations, and think and I've got stories which we'll get to it a little bit on pulling yourself out of above the forest, right, and looking at the landscape, and you need a friend that's willing to do that, right, and be able to say, okay, what else can, because it's about job search, what else can I do, what other industries, what other pieces, how many other times do I have to redo my resume? And it's daunting and it's frustrating for folks. And I totally get it. I've been there as well. So you've got to be able to get that game plan and build that confidence back up by having those conversations and flipping it around. And I keep going back to having that person or two, but it
Yeah.
really is a huge piece to build that confidence.
Yeah, and I think relying on your network, being prepared with who can help you with what, and being able to articulate what help you need is really, really important in that situation. And I know it's really difficult, but the more specific you can be with what help you need from who, the more likely you are to actually get that help. Because people want to help, but if you can't tell them how, it somehow becomes, it loses traction. So,
One of the hardest things is even just asking for help, honestly, right?
absolutely.
And whether it's asking for help for a job search, for even a project, right? People are proud, and that's where the frustrating part for, building that confidence back up because you're at that low is asking for help. And asking for help isn't a sign of weakness. It's collaboration, it's thought-provoking avenues. You give me your opinion and be able to work through those conversations. And if they are giving you that evil eye and thinking that you're not worthless or whatever it is, then they're really not the right person, right? They're there to be able to help support and guide through those conversations and situations. And again, you're not asking for help on every little thing, but it's that pick me up to be able to
Mhm.
drive through those things.
Yeah, and it could even just be practical help with, can you help me identify some recruiters in this space,
Yeah.
in my industry that target these jobs, right? There's lots of different avenues to go down for asking for help, but I think especially if you're in a career transition period, you want to be talking to as many people as you can and being clear with what you can use help with and how they can help you. So,
I mean, even in the jobs, we ask for help, right? And I've done
sure.
that with other recruiters. It's like, hey, how are you messaging candidates, right? What does that message look like? And how are you trying to get that? And what is your response rate in those in the candidates getting back to you? And, there's so many different ways to be able to do that. And that's a great collaboration because it's frustrating, right? Those situations
Right.
where I'm not getting candidates to come call me back and, what's going on, right? And you stop and think and go, is it
Hmm.
me? Is it what I'm saying? Is it whatever else
Right.
there is? And that's where you want to go to your network and go to your peers and go to other,
Right.
colleagues to be able to ask those things for help.
Well, and truthfully, I will just say I expanded my HR network during a job transition period where I was networking, looking for new opportunities. But what I've been able to do is keep that community of people who, when I have a difficult situation or I want to, reference what they're doing in their company with a policy, I keep those relationships alive and, ensure that we help each other, right? So it honestly turned out to be the best gift of all to have built this community of people through, a job search where I now have a way to keep in touch with them. What we're talking about are different things, and we can help one another. So,
So it goes back to what communication, and I think there's an episode in the past that we talk about communication a lot, but not to circle back everyone, but it really is, right? It's staying in touch, it's communicating, and it's a two-way street, right? It really has to be, sometimes you give more than you get, but it's a reciprocal thing that will come through in your world of things. So,
right,
if you feel like you're always giving, you might be in that cycle of that time, and that's
right.
okay. You will eventually get it back as well.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, the rule of reciprocity, I think they call it, but it definitely works and you never know when it's coming back your way. So you gotta give to get is like one of those sayings.
Absolutely. It reminds me of, a couple stories in a sense where, I talk about raising above the forest and I had a leader that would do that for me, right? And that's kind of where I learned it myself because I've done it later on because I remembered it. But he would pull me aside and, it's like, Joe, what's going on? Where are we at? What's happening? What's good? What's bad? What can we fix? What could we not? And it wasn't a prescribed time, but it was really different and sometimes nothing, right? There was nothing. It was like one of those things of, what? Everything's going, it's moving. I
Just
don't
like a
see.
reflection, right? Just an
Yeah,
opportunity to say, sit
that's a great way
back,
to put it.
look at the big picture, let's
Yep.
reflect.
and
Right.
then go back into the weeds, right? And go back into
Mm-hmm.
the forest of driving through the trenches that were, in sense. But
Mm-hmm.
it was that time to reflect, right? And really pull that back. And that's taken with me through my career. And I used to do that on my drive home, right? And go, you know what? There was every so often like, what's happening? Are we doing well? Could we do better? What could change? And sometimes there were some little things, and it was just my own reflection, not talking to someone in that situation. But it's one thing that really helped me.
Yeah. And I would honestly say, especially in a career transition period, sometimes you're doing things and you're spinning your wheels and you think it's leading somewhere, but then when you take a step back and say, like, well, what is this really accomplishing for me? What is the end goal? And, I think you have to be um, very thoughtful about where you put your time and energy and what's most important. And sometimes that's difficult because it feels more comfortable to do, maybe I call them inbox outbox things, right? Things that, like, I could see the piece of paper and I put the words down on it versus maybe doing the harder work and the real work of, building connections, talking to people, things that are a little bit more difficult to do for some people.
Yeah, in a transition, you could be busy, like you're
Hmm.
saying, with a
Right.
lot of different activities, but is it yielding what you want? Right. And that's the reflection that you need to take back. And, whether it's yourself or with somebody, but, you're right. There's a lot of busy work that could be done in those situations of, you are talking to folks, but are you getting to the next stages of what you want? Are you looking at a different avenue of it? Are you getting anywhere with those things? It's a hard thing, and that's why I go back to the start of figuring out a way to understand that you're in those points, right? And
Hmm.
like you said, it's attitude, it's personality potentially, right? You could be irritated, you could be, over stressing on things, you might be daunting. I go back to this just because it's hard to recognize, and that's where your friends and your network can help you with those things and keep that communication flowing.
Right.
It's a huge piece.
Right. And one thing I'll just say is so many people, and I know myself, look at their job as a huge part of their identity. So when that goes away, it really rocks your world and you kind of somehow feel lost. And sometimes it's hard to really pick yourself back up and, you know, have that direction and have that compass. So, like we talked about, rely on other people in those situations. You know, and one of the most impactful things I think I have found in that process is every person you talk to just say, do you know someone else that you think I'd benefit from meeting? Right. And honestly, I think that's how I met you, Joe. So it
Yeah.
certainly it certainly brought me some value. But I think if you could learn how to do that and navigate that, it becomes easier. So,
Yeah, it's the confidence in yourself, right? Because especially career transitions, you may not end up it might be a shift, right? And a
mm,
shift, whether it could be an industry, it could be a level of a role, the complexity of things. But, that's the means to the end in that situation at that moment in time in your career, in your life. And that's okay, but you have to be able to be comfortable to be able to move on. And it's the hardest thing I'm going to say right now is who cares what other people think? That's a hard thing to get over, right?
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
but you know what you're doing, right? And that's the honest truth of yourself, and be able to have that. You have to love yourself before others are going to love you, in a sense, right? So
Right.
that deep soul thinking is a big piece, and sometimes that takes time, sometimes it takes, you know doing things for yourself. Maybe go read a book. Maybe, honestly, it could be go take a vacation for
Go hit a
yourself.
golf ball.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the whole thing, right? And it's not selfish. That's your own self being able to be there to be able to go to the next stage
Right.
and love yourself to be able to move on. And it's totally true. And there's lots of different examples of that.
Right. Yeah, and I also think finding someone who's going through the same thing or has already gone through the same thing, I think both are helpful to have. Somebody who's on the other side that can kind of say, let me give you the Cliff Notes version of, I know where you're at, I've been through it, but it's also helpful to have someone that just is probably feeling the same things and going through the same things. And, you can have real honest conversations with that person. So I would just say, if someone's in that situation, putting themselves around other people going through it is definitely beneficial. And I've had a lot of people I've told that who have reluctantly done it and come back to me saying, I am so glad that I tried that because I don't want to be gender biased, but a lot of men feel like they don't need that. At least a lot of men that I've coached and that I've talked to. And in almost all cases, they came around saying, boy, was that really a helpful aspect for me? Because I think just knowing what they're feeling is normal and other people are feeling it somehow makes you feel better.
Right.
So, yeah.
And you mentioned the word coach, right? And coach can come into many different avenues of what I want to bring up on, it could be a person, your board of directors, you could have a coach on your board of directors. You could also pay for coaches. There's some high potentials or high achievers that have coaches, right, for their whole leadership development side of it. You could have a psychiatrist, right, or a
Sure.
psychologist that you're working with is a coach, right, as you work through things, whether it's personal or work related.
Right.
But those people are part of that ecosystem that we want to talk about on having that, building your confidence and thinking about yourself and really driving forward. And, coach can come in many different avenues of it. It could be your parents, it could be your brother or sister, it could be anybody,
Sure.
could be your coach.
I would say it could be your dog, but that would be tricky.
Well, they're a
It could be
great
your
fur
therapy,
baby.
though. It could be good therapy.
It's
So,
huge therapy. I mean, to have that
yeah.
lick of your face, whether it's a dog, a cat, or a lizard, or who knows, right? Whatever you have.
Right.
But that's your person, right? And that's okay. I mean, it's a
Hmm.
great way because they don't necessarily talk back, but you know, um, but it's there, right? And that's the comfort piece, and that builds confidence. Honestly, everything builds confidence as you do that, right? And it comes in many different forms or fashions.
Right. One thing that I don't think we touched on is really, just I know we talked a little bit about getting references and other things, but one thing I think is also useful is just feedback, right? Do you have honest people that you can go to, you can share, maybe try your elevator pitch on, right? And everybody needs that person that's maybe a little tough, a little bit tough love, right? So we need the people that kind of give us a hug when we need a hug, but we need people that also kind of push us a little bit, right? And I think getting that feedback from other people as to what they're seeing in you and, what you're projecting and stuff like that is also uh, definitely a step you need to take in this journey to, to get to where you need to be.
What's the word? Constructive criticism.
Yeah, constructive criticism,
You know,
right? We need that person that's saying, well, I think you could do better here, right?
have you
Um,
thought of this? Could you
right.
where about these things? And obviously, it's not a demeaning aspect of things. It's
No,
really just eye-opening, other perspectives, other things, and
right,
you've got to be able to be ready to be willing to take that feedback and be
right.
able to then reflect on it and apply it, hopefully, or and maybe not apply it, but be aware of those things.
Hmm.
I always ask people for that, and it's I encourage it. And I remember several teams, it's like, guys, give me feedback, right? What do you think of these things? Could I do anything this way? What about this? And I try to probe on those things because I always want to get better and drive through things. And maybe not be just confidence, but it's that push and drive for yourself. And for me, and I know we're going in a little different direction on this piece, but it's that ecosystem of trust that you're trying
Hmm.
to build into those things, which builds everybody's confidence, right? And
Right,
confidence comes, like I said, it could be a career transition, it could
right,
be your current work, it could be a relationship, it could be anything, right? Confidence is needed, and it comes in many forms or fashions
right.
that needs to happen.
And we talked a lot about people that might be in career transition, but let's be honest, a lot of us just live in our comfort zone, right? And
Yes,
if we live in our world of our comfort zone, are we really growing, right? Are we really getting better? So,
you
I
are a
would,
little bit, but you're not expanding, I would
right,
say.
right. So, maybe a good task for everyone or a good challenge for everyone would be to really ask yourself, what could I do to get a little bit more out of my comfort zone? What's going to make me feel a little bit uncomfortable that I might be able to do in my career that really promotes some growth for me? It might tell me that I either want to pursue something or maybe it just closes the door saying, you know what, that's definitely not for me.
Yep.
But I would just say that, I think it's a good time for anyone to reflect by saying, how do I, what is that next thing that I should take on that maybe makes me a little bit uncomfortable?
Absolutely. And, it could be, want to learn about immigration or compensation or, you know, organizational design or recruiting or AI, right? I mean, take AI as a huge aspect, and it comes in many forms or fashions
Mhm.
again, and we're all continuously learning, but dive into some piece of
Yeah.
it, right? And you're right. That uncomfortable piece will then build your confidence, right? And
Right.
share. It's a great conversation starter as well. Have
Yeah.
you
And
heard of
maybe,
this?
maybe it's like being a presenter at a conference, right?
Oh yeah,
You
public
know,
speaking. That's awesome.
yeah, maybe it's facilitating a training
Coming on a
session.
podcast. Anyone want to?
Maybe it's being
You
a
know?
guest on the podcast, right? Who knows? But
Yeah, it comes in any different way, but yeah, getting out of your comfort zone is a great. It's nerve-wracking and challenging, but then it builds confidence in a different way. It adds another tool in your toolbox to be able to grow in whatever your career, your development in many different ways.
right. Growth mindset, right? It promotes growth mindset.
There we go. There's the HR term. Sorry. Um,
Had to throw in a buzzword that Joe might not use.
you know, I'm more practical, but it is good into those things. In that sense, and we just kind of alluded to that piece. Everyone that's listening, please comment. What is strategies have you used? How have you built confidence? Have you helped someone else? Those stories yourselves will be able to share, and people will take something away and go, oh, maybe I could do that, or I've done something like that, and it builds and snowballs into those things. So please comment, and we'd love to hear your perspective. So in that, Jill, I kind of shared one story. I'll let you take the floor. Do you have a story that you wanted to share in this whole world of things?
Hmm. There's so many possibilities here, but I think I'm going to share one story about when I knew I graduated in the world of asking for help. And it's a time when I was actually going through a career transition and I was trying to build my confidence in networking with people, but I actually had with someone and I knew they had a lot of network connections in recruiting and executive recruiters. And during that meeting, I think the terms came up, which often do, like, so how are you doing? What is it that you need help with? Right. And we've all been there. We've been on that side of the table. And the normal me would have been like, oh, I'm doing okay. I'm doing, put one foot in front of the other. This is what I've done. I don't know. That's how I would have normally answered the question. And in that case, I talked about what I was doing and I said, listen, I understand you are very well networked with executive recruiters. I would love for you to introduce me and make an introduction to the three top executive recruiters for CHROs in your network and endorse me. Would you be willing to do that for me? He's like, absolutely. Right. And then we went into a
Nice.
conversation with who those three people were. And within a week, I had three new conversations going with three executive recruiters. And he was very happy to do that for me. It's definitely not something that would have happened that quickly without that introduction. So it's just an illustration of being thoughtful, planning ahead, knowing who you're going to be meeting with, knowing how they might be able to help you. And I think the more you can articulate exactly what you want and need, the more likely it is to happen. And I'll just say that that was a big step for me. And that's when I feel like I graduated, right? Because I've always been in a position of saying,
Sure.
I am a giver, not an asker, right? So it's
It's
very hard to
super
be on
hard
the
to
other
ask.
side for me. Yes.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great that it worked out, and now you got another network of folks that are looking out for you,
Right.
and in your career side of things. I would say, one story I was trying to think through for myself, another one I talked about, getting above and that reflection piece, which was really helpful, and like I said, I use it to this day still every so often. It's really I've flipped the stages more into trying to help others, especially in this current economic situation, right? Where how can I have there's only a few, right? Because you only have so much time, but it's keeping in touch with them. It's having a quick conversation, whether it's a text message, a phone call, a LinkedIn message,
Right.
and really pushing, like, everything that we kind of talked about is what I'm doing that with a couple individuals and
Mm-hmm.
trying to get that creative juices thinking what could be done differently. So I'm playing the coach side and
Right.
prompting them more because I know they're frustrated and I know it's challenging, and I wanted to be there, right? So I
Right.
played the other side of that kind of story, and
Hmm.
one person literally just landed today that got an offer. Someone last week, again, wasn't necessarily the result of me giving them a lead or doing things, but
Right.
the appreciation back, and it was just it was awesome that hey, they've
Right.
got a job and they've moved forward and they were there, is good enough for me.
Absolutely. It's one of the most gratifying things. In fact, one of the people you're talking about, I think I referred to you because I started helping him and he just landed this
No,
week, right?
I didn't know
No,
about that
different
one.
person. Okay.
Different person. There's two others that
Different
got landed
person,
jobs, so
right?
that's even better.
Yeah.
Um,
So call
you
it a
know,
trifecta. You got the hat trick, Joe.
there's one that I'm still working through, and it's challenging and it's hard, and we'll continue on, and I've known that person for oh my God now years,
Yeah.
and just staying in touch and through our different careers, but it's I want to be there because it's daunting and frustrating in this career challenges, right?
Right. Yeah, and truthfully, I think anyone who's been on the other side of it understands how important it is to be there for someone else and to pay it forward. And I certainly find a lot of personal fulfillment in that and enjoy doing that. So whenever I talk about coaching, it's normally a situation like that where I'm just trying to help somebody else navigate through that process. And I think that's a great message, Joe, and a really important one that even if we're the person in the situation today that needs that from someone else, at some point we're going to be on the other side of it and being able to pay it forward and give it back. So,
And I know we're not talking about coaching, but I mean, it's also if you're in those situations and you're helping, you also have to recognize sometimes when people don't want it, right? Or
sure.
that they're not going to use that. So you have to spend your time wisely,
Hmm.
and drive through that. And like I said at the start, it's hard to recognize yourself when you need that, but as a coach and as your person that's in your board, that's a part of that board of directors, and if they're not using your time right, well then maybe it's time to resign or
Hmm.
relax your duties into that analogy of things because you have to play a different role because maybe they don't want that or they want to look at it things differently. So again, it's another reflection, but it's driving through those things on what people need and where things go. But that's all about building confidence in the communication side of things.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I'm glad we dove into this today, Joe. Are there any other things that you want to share or reflect on?
No, I think we covered the topics I was the most interested in, and I guess my recap of things is really communication, being there, practicing, all these different analogies and different aspects of things. But it's really when you get to a plateau, if you can recognize it, is really then talking to somebody else and then navigating through. This is what I'm doing. What else could I do? What other ideas? Whatever happens. And the plateau, people talk about that as weight loss and then working out as a plateau, but you have a career plateau. You could have a career transition plateaus. We have plateaus in many different avenues, and you could use that to be able to then adjust, think, and then drive forward and really, have that reflection to be able to move forward and you know, make a change for something.
Right. Well, I'm going to take a little different path and say my reflection is everyone has a homework assignment to pull out their elevator pitch and see if they could make it a little bit better and take a fresh eyes approach at it. And the second one I would say is really think about that comfort zone of yours and what might be the next thing you want to tackle that pushes you a little bit outside that comfort zone.
So then I'm going to tack on to your elevator pitch is use it on someone new, right?
Right. Someone you
Get to
don't know.
someone else exactly that you don't know that you've networked with and say, listen, I want to practice something. And that gets you out of your comfort zone and never in peace of it and really try to drive through that. And, again, I think to tack on your homework assignment, I think is great. And, really figure out where and what you need that help with and ask.
Right. Well, hopefully no one's going to end up in handcuffs over that uh, caveat.
I hopefully no handcuffs. So, but if you need help, comment and like us, follow. Hopefully you will again. But really appreciate you tuning in and listening. Like, follow, share the podcast. More to come of things. Jill is an awesome topic. Really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for listening.
Until next time, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.